YouTube, what's good? It's your man Ribs from Doing Film Things. So this past week we did something very, very cool. I basically hit the town at night and did some portraits with Kodak Vision3 500T. I got my friends Leo and Zane together and they joined me as we went out and hit the town with another friend of mine who's a model and influencer on Instagram. So we basically utilized this colored light that I just bought. It's a video light, it's an LED video light, and it allows you to choose a whole bunch of different colors when using the light. So the goal was to take this light and kind of do all kinds of interesting creative stuff with it while using the ambient light that is all over downtown London and around Chinatown. So we were trying to see how far we could take that and see how far we can get in terms of creativity when combining different light sources and using film. So for the shoot, I used this camera right here, my Canon 7 rangefinder. And my goal was basically to see how the film behaved. I didn't really have a plan or kind of a very specific goal. I was just interested in seeing how 500T would handle all of these different light scenarios. But I also wanted to retain as much detail as possible in these images, given that they were night images. So I was definitely, controlling my shutter speed a bit to try to get steady shots, but also get as much light as possible into every single one. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the footage and some of the images from that night, and I'll give you some of my thoughts afterwards.
Look at this guy.
Who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I?
You're who? And you?
So,
you're hiding right now,
Leo.
but you're not. Everybody's gonna know who you are.
We are London's finest street photographers and portrait photographers. Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing?
I don't know. I thought that was funny.
joke.
We're in Chinatown.
While we're waiting,
Say what's up.
everything's good.
So y'all don't see what happened earlier, but I brought a Canon and it's dead, no batteries. That's my fault. So I'm shooting with this now, another Canon, but this Canon 7 rangefinder. Never done portraits with this, so good luck to you.
Time for
Good luck to you. Get closer. Sound like right. Yeah. There we go. 1, 2, boom. That was a good first shot. All right, I'm gonna. Let's see what happens. I should be able to hold it steady, right? Hold it, bro. Can you get a little bit closer? Actually, this might help me at this point. Yeah, there we go. You said hold my breath. Yeah.
One shot.
I don't even know where I am at this point. Here we go.
Guys. Yeah? Ready? 3, 2, 1, and action.
Focus here. 1, 2, 1 more. Can you, I want to see more of the ring. Can you kind of just like that? Focus face here. That was probably 2 stops underexposed. Light meter was telling me 1/4 of a second. I did 1/30 of a second. So, you know, it happens. We'll see. It might be too hot. What do you think?
There's only one way to find out.
That's right.
It's for YouTube.
A crunch. Is it good?
Oh, so good.
He doesn't even do the pre off the breath, man. He's just like, you know.
It's not too hot. It's hot, but it's not too hot.
Yo, that was a lot of fun. It was nice to kind of get out and walk around. You know, it's basically the only thing you can do nowadays since all businesses are shut and you can't be anywhere indoors. But being outside, you know, was pretty cool. The weather wasn't terrible and we had the streets to ourselves because of the general lockdown. So every single street that we saw that had cool lights and kind of an interesting locale, we could do whatever we wanted with very, very little interruption. So as you saw there, I had a bit of a mishap with my camera. I brought one of my automatic SLRs with me and it actually was dead even before I arrived. Forgot that the batteries had run out and I still took it with me, and of course I couldn't use it. Luckily I had this camera right here in the bag as well, and I kind of just brought it for no reason, but it ended up saving me. And lens wise, I only had the 53mm lens on there that I talked about in this video up here. That 53mm lens, you know, it's good for portraits because of that kind of tighter focal length, but overall using a rangefinder camera for me is not the easiest. I'm not very experienced with rangefinder cameras, especially when it comes to portraits, because I like to, you know, change compositions. I like to get low and change the angles. And for me right now, all of that stuff gets a bit harder when I'm using a rangefinder, given that the focusing patch is kind of dead center. Therefore, you know, moving around and doing all these angles, especially shooting at 2.8, is a bit challenging. I think I still nailed what I wanted to do, but it definitely wasn't as easy as it would have been if I had my automatic SLR instead. 500T killed it, honestly. The colors that I got from the images were fantastic. You know, the different lights, whether it was the ambient light or the light from the LED light, everything kind of meshed together very nicely, and I didn't notice anything strange happening. I don't know if that would happen with any other film, but I just know with 500T, things looked like I wanted them to look and how I imagined them when I was actually shooting the photos. The other thing is I got low contrast images, which in this case is very good. The 500T kind of gives you this canvas that you can then work and do whatever you want. And it kind of makes sense given that this film is designed for use with cinema, where, you know, you do your shots in production, and then of course after the fact you do post-production and you edit and you do all kinds of stuff. So with the 500T, my images, you know, they look a bit flat from a contrast perspective. There's a lot of detail in the shadows, and again, that's expected, and that's exactly what I wanted, to be honest with you. It's interesting, you know, let's look at some of Zane's images here. This isn't a direct comparison because, you know, the images aren't the same, compositions aren't the same or anything like that. But you can see in his images, he's using Cinestill 800T, which of course is the same base film as what I had here with the 500T. But his film is cross-processed, and it's also shot at 800 as per Cinestill's instructions. And you can see it's a very, very different look. There's a lot more contrast off the bat there. On top of that, shadow detail is a bit more muted. You know, the blacks go a little bit darker in these particular shots, and it looks pretty cool. You know, I'm not criticizing it or anything like that. Just a very different look. You know, Cinestill gives you something very kind of signature out of the box, and I actually like that a lot, especially when it comes to printing, because the Cinestill images print extremely well. So I'm actually looking forward to trying my 500T images in the darkroom to see if they print, you know, okay. I've done experiments before, but in this case, there's so much color and so much kind of interesting stuff going on with the light that I'm really curious to see how that plays out. My shots, for the most part, especially compared to Zane's, you'll see they're so much flatter. And it's as if, you know, I was shooting in like S-Log or something like that. You know, just give me the flattest color profile as possible in order for me to then do some edits after the fact. And actually, I did do that with one specific image. You know, I'll probably edit a lot of these later on, but for the sake of this video, I took one of my favorite portraits and I downloaded it as a TIFF right out of Lightroom, and then I brought it right back into Lightroom to then make some edits on top of that. I just find it easier to edit a TIFF file because then I can use all of the Lightroom dials as opposed to using my original scan, which is converted with Negative Lab Pro, and then, you know, it kind of gets really confusing from there. So I took that TIFF image and then I started to mess around with all kinds of stuff. You know, I messed with the curves. I kind of added some contrast by increasing the highlights and decreasing the shadows a bit. I actually messed around with the curves as well, but on specific color channels to really brighten up the saturation of certain colors in particular parts of the image. So, I brought up some of the blue and that highlight, and then the red, I kind of messed with it a little bit further. And then I split toned the image as well, just kind of introducing a little bit more oomph in the highlights versus the shadows. Added a vignette. I really kind of messed with this image a lot, the way I would a digital file. And I really like what I got. As you can see, there's a very big difference here between the original file and my final edit. And again, that's kind of intentional because 500T really gives you that kind of blank canvas that you can then manipulate as much as you want and actually still retain a ton of detail. I think that's the most interesting part. I messed around with the contrast a lot and I really pushed this image quite well. And you still have a lot of detail and the grain and the noise and all of that, it's restrained. Obviously this is a digital scan of a film shot. So, the interplay between those things isn't as direct, but something like Cinestill, like I said earlier, when you're doing that directly on the chemistry while developing the film, you cross process, that instantly changes everything about the film in terms of the look you're gonna get. And it's really gonna kind of alter how your shadows appear. It's gonna alter the grain. It's gonna do so many different things that, typically is reserved for Photoshop or Lightroom, but for Cinestill, it's actually happening in the chemistry in real life, which again, really, really interesting. And I appreciate that about Cinestill, given that the way you treat it will alter what happens with it. In my case, the 500T, when you process it as it's supposed to be processed according to the manufacturer with the ECN2 chemicals, you're gonna get the specific look that it was designed to achieve when processed that way, which means very clean, kind of flat image that you can then mess around and do whatever you want. The dynamic range is quite wide and you really pick up detail kind of everywhere throughout the image. So very happy to have pushed this image a bit in post to see how far I could take it. And of course, it scans so nicely. It gives you something very, very clean and easy to work with right off the bat. This was definitely fun. I really like using 500T because it just feels good and I like the output and I like the freedom I get from it as well. So I'm definitely gonna do this again. Probably get Zane together again and maybe do a bit more of an aggressive comparison, but we'll hit the streets again. We'll find another model, maybe a girl this time, just to change it up. And let's see what we can do. So make sure you look for that over the next couple weeks because we're definitely gonna hit the town again. Before we close this video, I wanna go ahead and thank Leo as well. Leo actually shot a lot of the footage that you saw in the video part, especially those slow motion shots. You see how crispy they are? He's so good with the camera, he's just got a great eye and he does everything in manual focus, which is even more impressive. So shout out to Leo. All right, y'all, that's what I got for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and leave me a like. And of course, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. To the next video, y'all. Peace.